Welcome to Truckload Indexes Live. I'm here with Chris Henry right here in Chattanooga. We're talking about the truckload sector and specific the data that you, through the TCA's TPP program, which is, what is the TPP program?
So TPP is a benchmarking initiative that TCA created back in 2002. So it stands for the TCA Profitability Program, peer group benchmarking, and then online benchmarking from 205 different motor carrier profiles throughout North America.
So the trucking companies, these truckload carriers, are basically doing two things. They're submitting GL data, general ledger data, which is really the accounting, it's the accounting record. It's all the transactions into the accounting balance sheet and income statement. They're submitting that, and that information is being compiled and benchmarked, which then you, through the TPP program, are doing coaching and discussion about best practices. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so we combine their GL data with a handful of operational stats, trucks, miles, ELD summary data, in order to give them, right now we have 405 different KPIs to see how they're performing versus their peers. Coaching, it's really peer group coaching. So these carriers get together 3 times per year in specific cohorts, non-competitive cohort or groups. And we have these topic-specific meetings where we do a deep dive within each carrier's operations to figure out why is one carrier really good on, for example, maintenance expense, and one carrier is underperforming, and try to filter out and get the best practices on those different categories or topics out of people. So trying to add context to good performance.
So coming from the GL ledger, the general ledger data, it's the same information that an accountant uses to send to their banks or investors. It's pretty important, but also very sensitive information. Why would they participate and basically open the books, if you will?
Yeah, well, we have ways for that data to remain private, both within our database and outside our database. But once you're in a group, one of the table stakes is you have to basically, get rid of that confidentiality within the group. People see your results.
But it's only in the group. It's
within
not
that
broader.
Specific group. So between 8 and 15 carriers would see each other's results. We don't talk about rates. We don't talk about customers. We don't talk about pricing. Those are off the table, fuel surcharge. But everything else, operating ratio, maintenance expenses is a big topic. That is on the table. And you get to see how you're doing specifically versus the carriers that you look to as the golden performers.
I mean, it's pretty amazing that one of the things I've always been impressed is bringing the carriers in and having them open the books and collaborate. Because oftentimes in the trucking industry, there's a lot of ego in this industry, for good and bad at times, and it's a very competitive industry. But you guys have found a way to really collaborate. I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it took a while to get to that point. When we first started marketing the program, asking people for their private GL data was an uphill battle. But once you got to the point where you had certain carriers that people looked as a gold standard reporting their data, it made other carriers, small, medium, and large, more comfortable. So we've established a process to not only ensure that that data is going to remain private within that group, as well as within our database, but also add context to why this is important to share that information with the program.
And these forums, the data as it relates to their own performance stays in the group. It's not broadly distributed. But one of the things you guys do is you actually aggregate that data, put it in different cohorts, and then out of 200 companies, you've gone from 15 to 20 that are seeing, or 10 to 15 that are seeing operating performance inside the cohort, to a collection of about 200 fleet profiles that's then built into aggregation and aggregated indexes. Is that right?
Exactly. So we have, beyond the groups, any user, whether you're in a group or not, you can look at your results outside the group. So you can use what we call population filters. So you can filter based on size, so small, medium, and large, and beyond. Average tractor age. So if you're looking at maintenance expense, you want to be able to look at carriers with similar average tractor age. So you can do that. You can filter by geography, a bunch of different filters you can apply.
So what do you see And what I also know what you do is you splice the data between the best performers, the top performers, where it's really the best in class of across the board, the most profitable companies, and you have everybody else, and you're able to see the difference between the best of the best and the middle of the pack. And I'm wondering, what is the biggest difference between a top performer and a not great performer, based on the data that you see?
Well, it's interesting. There is a stark contrast between those companies that get involved in the program and then also the carriers that have been involved in the best practice groups program for a long time. So I don't know if you can extrapolate anything from that, but our hypothesis is through the interactions with the groups, they're able to take those best ideas and concepts and better processes and take it back to their companies and improve. So the common denominator is everyone wants to improve, whether you're starting today or you've been in the program for 15 years.
Because they're joining, it takes some work, right?
Yeah, it takes work. It's not the direct cost of participating in the program, it's the resources of doing stuff with the information that you get from the groups. But I would say the biggest area that separates the underperformers from the top performers is maintenance. Maintenance can be a huge black hole for some carriers, and if they don't have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in maintenance, accurately tracking inventory, really understanding life cycle management in terms of their trucks, handling, the downtime and tracking downtime. Basically, that can mean the difference of, a 5 to 10 point swing in OR.
That's a 5 to 10% profit margin.
Yeah.
You're talking about an industry that operates literally on pennies to the dollar. That's the difference between making it and not.
Yeah.
So maintenance expense. So if you ran a trucking company, you would say the number one thing you were to do, let's say that you hypothetically, I know that will never happen because it's a different kind of work than you want to do. You're a data guide, we're commentators, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to run a truck, even though my family's in trucking, I don't want to run a trucking company. And I respect those that do. But if you were to go in and run a trucking company tomorrow, the number one thing that you would do if you were taking over a distressed company would be attack maintenance. Is that right?
Absolutely. We, get rid of all the old equipment, because a lot of people have, or a lot of carriers, especially those that are kind of sniffing around the program, they have the concept of having equity in the truck, whereas the top performers don't care about equity. They want to focus on utilizing the trailer and the truck as much as possible, and keeping the average tractor age to the point where they're not going to have to start reinvesting in maintenance.
So the carriers that are keeping those trucks young,
yeah,
cycle young, and turning them over on a frequent basis.
Yeah. So the average tractor age for our top performers is about 2.1 years.
Okay.
So just over. So 4.2 is typically the length, the maximum.
So they're
length.
turning them over within 4 years, basically.
Exactly, and we're starting to see that creep down even further. So a lot of companies
get younger.
Get younger. So, and that's something that hasn't changed as the rate environment has changed over the last 6 months. They're continuing. Our top performers are continuing with their commitment to recycling and replenishing their fleets and keeping them new. So that would be the number one thing. Number two thing, it may sound stupid, but I would find a maintenance director that has OCD. That's the first thing.
My wife would be a great maintenance director.
Yeah, so she has another career
She's
opportunity.
OCD. She wouldn't know how to fix a truck if her life depended on it, because she makes me do all that work, but she is OCD.
Yeah, and so and this is kind of weird, but the top performing fleets from a maintenance point of view, you go into their shops, their maintenance director is typically going to have a little bit of OCD in it, and the shops are going to be spotless. So that leads to tracking data properly, better inventory management, all those kind of things. So those would be the three things.
So you can walk into a maintenance shop, and just by looking at how well organized it is, you can almost.
There's been very few times where that hasn't proven to be true.
Got it.
And the ones that it hasn't proven to be true, I question the numbers.
Okay, interesting. So maintenance being number one, and if you're operating a fleet that's not doing as great, is it as simple as going out and buying new trucks, or is it, to your point, getting a maintenance director that actually manages the equipment religiously in terms of tracking preventive maintenance, making sure the trucks are inspected when they come into the shop, running those quickly so the drivers aren't detained? Is that really what it's all about?
Well, tracking downtime is a big thing. A lot of carriers don't track downtime or what is downtime. So from when a truck goes down, from that call to say, hey, we're down, to when it's available for dispatch, that'd be the number one thing I would have carriers do is and that's what the top performers do. I'm not creating that. This is what those carriers are doing. So they're tracking that their entire fleet on a month-by-month basis on downtime in hours, not days. The other thing I would do, and this is something that a lot of carriers talk about, is if they're looking to acquire a company, they actually reduce the value of the company based on the tractor age. So they'll have a cutoff point. We'll say, none of these additional trucks that you have that are 6 and 7 years old add value to the company.
So
there is no
wipe them
equity
out of the balance sheet and say we're going to give zero value.
We're going to give zero value, and we're going to reduce it even more because we have to go out and get new trucks. So that would be something. If you're a small carrier and you don't have access, especially in the environment we are today, with if you don't have access to good capital at good rates, that will be a constraint that you may have right now. But if you don't have that constraint, if you have access to capital, that would be the quickest way to reduce your maintenance costs, is replenish your fleet.
So the letter of the day is maintenance. M is the letter. Mm-hmm. Maintenance is the key. What is number 2 on your list?
Utilization. Okay. Trucks, trailers. So, how many miles we can get, not just out of the trucks, but out of those trailers
and
as
that's
well.
Revenue per truck per week.
Revenue per truck per week, revenue per trailer per week, revenue per trailer per day, revenue per active driving hour by driver. So we now have ELD data that we're getting from about 40% of our fleets and growing. So instead of dividing all the revenue and expenses by miles, we're now actually dividing it by hours. And I think that's a truer or a better comparison from a benchmarking point of view. And it's opening a lot of people's eyes.
Because they realize that the drivers are not getting 11 hours, right?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, one of the things, I remember when we first started collecting ELD data at FreightWaves prior to knowing you, is that they were getting 7.2 hours per day, and you're like, this can't be, because they are allocated 11, but it's actually, they're not getting that kind of utilization. No matter what we do on the regs, they're not able to maximize the full 11.
And
what are you seeing? What's the numbers that you're seeing?
Well, it's a pretty big range. So in terms of on-duty hours, we represent it from a percentage point of view. So driving hours is a percentage of total on-duty hours. We're seeing ranges from 51%, I think was the lowest, up to like 95%. So a lot of that has to do with how they operate, whether they're regional or...
Is that of the 14 or is that of the 11?
That is of the 11.
Okay,
yeah.
So 50%, which would be 5.5 hours, all the way to, you have some fleets that are over 10 hours a day, right?
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah, so, but it is opening people's eyes, and I don't think we've seen any set of KPIs that has been better received than that.
I think it's interesting because the ELD mandate has been polarizing, and it certainly have brought a lot of carriers and people just in conflict. You go to Facebook and you mention the word ELD, and it's fire and stuff. But it strikes me that we're now at a point with the ELD mandate where we actually have a version of the truth. Mm-hmm. We've never had the ability to get real-time information on where trucks are being detained, where we can increase utilization, and really detention, nobody's winning from detention.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that you can do, whether it's the driver, the carrier, the shipper, everybody's losing in that. And all those parties, frankly, have responsibility of causing detention as well as using processes to mitigate them. And that's everybody. That's the brokers, that's the shippers, that's the carriers, and the drivers. They're all contributing to that. Some do it more than others, and certainly shippers and consignees are commonly sourced as the problem. Mm-hmm. But now we have the version of truth that we've never had before.
Yeah, and you actually get to understand what is the cost of that truck sitting with actual numbers, not estimated, not, And
everybody lies.
Everyone.
I mean, this is the other thing about this industry is, if there is a truth that I learned early in, is it's liar's poker. In the sense that the shipper's own internal systems oftentimes are not matching what the truck is actually at. And part of it is the folks paying the detention bill are not the ones that are controlling the docks. And I'm not talking about a shipper that in an intra-company move. Oftentimes, the person paying the freight bill has nothing to do with the company that's delivering to or picking up. When a driver bumps a dock, that the person's dock that they're hitting is oftentimes not the person paying the freight bill. I'm talking about the freight company. I'm talking about the ultimate person writing the check.
Right. Yep.
And they're oftentimes writing the check. It may be outside their network. So the transportation manager who really wants to be a shipper of choice and wants to pay the bill has no visibility of what happens at that warehouse.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the part that's underappreciated. There just isn't a lot of good data. And if you run a local warehouse, you don't want to be blamed. So you find ways in creating rules that mitigate that information coming back to you. And so the nice thing about the ELD mandate is we actually have a version of truth. And it is the truth, and we've never had that ability.
And I think carriers in general, especially based on the response we're getting, they've underestimated that true cost substantially. So their eyes are getting opened, which will lead to better pricing decisions long term by customers. So they're going to use that data. We can't use that data on a customer by customer basis because we don't collect that transactional data, but they are going to start, because we're talking to companies already that are starting to use that ELD data to rate customers by utilization of hours.
That's amazing.
And I think that's brilliant, and it's going to lead to better use of the driver's time and a more profitable carrier base.
So let's talk about one more thing that we've talked a lot about is fuel. Would that be in the top three, or would it?
I wouldn't say so. If one of the measures we have is net fuel expense. So net fuel expense is gross minus fuel surcharge. So for the most part, most of the mid and large size carriers have insulated themselves from large swings in diesel prices. But for the smaller carriers, that is a big issue. On the small carrier side, and I'm going to say 5 to 30 trucks, they don't have, in general, as an effective fuel surcharge program because they're more exposed to the spot market. So because of that, when you see fuel goes up, and this kind of leads into some of the failures they're talking about, those guys are the first ones to get hit. So when fuel swings, it does represent a big portion of their true expense, whereas on the large carrier side, they're insulated with fuel surcharge.
So there's a big delta between the big guys who are able to buy fuel at wholesale rack prices, have fuel optimization systems, and perhaps, back to the maintenance conversation, have younger trucks.
Absolutely.
That are operating better. And
it all ties together.
And they put speed limiters in them typically because of insurance reasons that mitigate the amount of fuel it's burning. So there's a lot of inherent built-in operating advantages that the larger carriers have built into their operations, which mitigate the fuel expense of the delta on that.
Absolutely, that's economies of scale in a nutshell for sure.
And just more cleaner operations. You look at the smaller guys, fuel, they're oftentimes the word price taker. They just take whatever the market gives them, and they have no way to offset that cost. And so if diesel prices accelerate, they're paying the bill.
Yep.
And the problem with diesel is that cash flow is going out the moment you buy it, or maybe within 2 to 3 days. If you're on a fuel payment program, maybe a week. And oftentimes you have to pay it on a cycle, and you may not get paid. Even if you're going to pay fuel surcharge or a derivative of fuel surcharge, that could come in 40 days. And so if you see diesel prices spike, you're going to eat that immediately.
And it's a sad thing. We have smaller carriers within our platform. Smallest is 13 trucks, and they're feeling it right now. And the last thing you want to hear is guys operating unprofitably, but when they start talking about potentially shutting down or looking at being acquired at a discount, you never want to see that. But the reality is, there is a large capacity. There's more capacity in the market than there was last year.
There's a glut, right?
There's a glut.
There's more supply than there is demand.
Yeah,
and
seats are being filled within carriers, so that tells you that there's enough of supply of drivers. They're not talking as much about having difficulty finding drivers, maybe quality drivers, but drivers in general, they're not having.
It's not the constraints on their operations as they saw last year.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, tell me, how does a fleet or a broker. You can actually have brokerage as a part of your benchmarking program as well.
Yeah, so we started a brokerage group in November of last year, and that's grown to 20 companies. All of them currently are linked to an asset-based company, so either a parent or sister company, but we are going outside that. So the groups themselves control who gets in and who doesn't, so it's a democratic process, so it's all in favor or one voting against. That would prevent someone from coming into our group. But brokerage is something that has been not been a focus for a lot of carriers just because of the market last year. But now they're starting to take, all of our carriers are starting to take a harder look at their brokerage operations and sales in general. So kind of ramping back up perhaps the group that they didn't pay attention to for the last 10 years and because of the different rate environments and those kind of things.
So there's brokerage benchmarking that you have as well, and that's a fast-growing part of the business.
Yeah, it is, and we have demand to form a second group that we hope to have done by November. So there's 20 in the first group. We'll hope to have 20 in the second group by the end of the year. And a lot of it in those groups is talking about how to structure your broker compensation and sales process. So it's kind of refreshing to hear them talk about prospecting and being strategic about their sales and compensating people appropriately for those sales. And, yeah.
So what is the process if I'm a trucking company, an asset-based carrier, and I wanted to join benchmarking? What does that take? What does that look like?
Yeah, it depends on what you want out of it. So if you're just looking at the data, we have a service for you. So we have Engage, which is an online tool.
And that doesn't require you to submit. You just get benchmarked.
You do.
Oh,
so
you do
it's a give and take scenario. So yes, you have to pay a fee to be part of it. It's a small monthly fee. There's no contract, so you can cancel at any time. But in order to get the data, you have to give.
Okay.
So we do an onboarding process where we map your GL data and your operational data and make it easier for you to report your data. And that makes the online people or the people that are just interested in the data, that gives them enough. Where most people, the natural evolution is they want to get into the groups where they share information and network with their peers. And the process for that is identical, except you then also have to choose a group that you want to be part of, and then that group has to accept you. So
is it hard to get in?
It can be, depending on how concentrated the group is in terms of geography. So if we have 5 Tennessee-based carriers and a 6th wants to get in, it's going to be difficult. So they can't have too much overlap in terms of customers.
You guys work to fit them into a group.
We do. So we try to find a group that fits them without any competitive issues so they can share information freely. And also from a geographic point of view, we don't want an over-concentration in one region, just from an idea flow point of view as well as competitive issues.
But you also don't want people picking off their employees and taking out and using the information against them in the market.
Well, and also too, within the groups we have bylaws which specifically doesn't allow you to recruit other people from other companies and customers and those kind of things.
And where do they go to get information about this?
The easiest way to do that is go to truckloadindexes.com.
We have it right here, the URL for truckloadindexes.com. Chris Henry is the contact. Anything else, Chris, you want to add?
No, I think it's been a great program. It's been proven to be very valuable for carriers as well as brokerage operations, and
it's almost like it's like a outside board of directors that you don't work for, but they're giving you advice and guidance. Maybe board of advisors is the more appropriate term. But I've been really impressed with the level of interest and the level of energy that those guys have, and certainly excited to see where it goes. Lots of exciting things ahead for you and the TCA program, and look forward to diving deeper into the benchmarking business at FreightWaves Live in Chicago on November 12th and 13th. Chris Henry is going to be there. And there's actually going to be a cocktail reception specifically. If you're interested in benchmarking, Chris is going to be hosting a cocktail reception at that event in Chicago. We invite you to come out. It's going to be a fantastic time. We have 1,500 people already in the queue to come. It's going to be a party. We're excited, and you're going to be there. I'm going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. We look forward to seeing you.